let's talk about lexical this, which is one of my favorite topics in JavaScript, especially when interviewing someone. This is a very old topic which has evolved over time, especially starting from 2015 with the new arrow functions. Alright, let's present the problem. So, I would like to create an object called user, and my user has first name, Peter, last name, Williams, yeah? And it has a method, getName. So whenever we call getName, it will return this dot first name and then this space dot this dot last name. So the question is, if now we run user.getName, I'm pretty sure everyone smells the output of this snippet, right? What will it return? We understand that, right? That's fantastic. But can anyone give me a convincing reason why? In other words, what's the value of lexical this? Interesting. Not really. Say it again. An object. I like it. I like it. An object. And what's the value of that object, Anais? First of all, let's run the snippet and see if it returns Peter Williams. It does, right? So that's good. So when talking about lexical this, we can refer to it as an object, as Anais proposed. But what's the value of the object? Lexical this refers to the object that invoke the function where lexical this is. What object invoke getName? User. That's why lexical this equals user. This is vital. This is vital. And it's not that complicated to grasp. But when you ask someone in a job interview what's lexical this and start thinking and buzzwords, like that person has no idea. Yeah. So first of all, lexical this is an object. It could be null, it could be undefined, it could be weird things, right? This afternoon, right, we'll be talking about call, bind, and apply. But generally speaking, lexical this is an object. And the value of the object is the object that invokes the function where we are using it. So let me make it a bit more complicated. I hope this experience is still readable. So instead of user, I like to have two users. User 1, and now look at what I'm doing. User 2, first name, something like that. So, if now we run, let me finish that. Look at what I'm doing. User2, let user2 doesn't have any getName function, only first name and last name. However, look at what I'm doing now. User2.getName equals user1.getName. Now, eventually, I'm running user2.getName. What will it return? you don't think it won't return anything? Correct. So let's present the options, right? So Pyric, he says nothing. Then we got Vincent and Iwan. So they said it will return Peter Williams. Anais agrees with Vincent and Iwan. What do you think, Nilofer? All right. And Richard? So Richard, Carla, Johnson. Why, Richard?
Well, I think because we are setting the get name in user 2 to a function. So essentially user 2 has a function which does the get name stuff. And the lexical this might then apply to user 2's own properties.
So I was thinking that would get overwritten around user 1 equal to 2. And then when you call user 2, get that easy.
I'm afraid to say that only one person got the job, right? And that was Richard. So it's very fun because we always do the same format. We explain lexical this. It refers to the object that invokes the function. You understand that? Yeah, yes, for sure. Yeah, it's super obvious. Then 40 seconds later, we present an example and everyone failed, right? That means that no one really understood what we explained before. If we said that lexical this refers to the object that invokes the function, which object invoked the getName function? Was it user 1 or user 2? User 2, right? Look at this line. Yes, because user 2 is invoking the function, then here lexical this refers to user 2, correct? In other words, that should display Carla Johnson. Here you go. What happened if we put user 1 back? Peter Williams, correct. Yeah? So it's up to the object that invoked the function. This is very, very important. Do you think here we are creating a copy of the function? Or what are we actually doing here on line 15? Correct. We are creating a pointer, a reference to the same function in memory. So we are not copying the function. Any questions? No? So this is the basics of lexical this. But obviously, that now can become easily way more complicated. I have a theory that lexical this is just a matter of time that it will become mind-blowing, right? If I keep increasing the complexity, at some point humans will be unable to predict the outcome. But of course, after 8 minutes, it should be still manageable. So let me present you something fun. Assuming we all understood that, let me get rid of user 2 to simplify things a bit. We only got user 1, but then, look at what I'm doing. What's going on here? Yeah, but who is invoking the getName function? Eh? Oh. Vincent said the magic word. Yeah? I'll tell you what will happen. It will return Marie Curie. Let's see if that's correct. Here you go. But it's not obvious, right? Because we said that lexical this refers to the object that invokes the function. But what is the object? We don't have user1.firstName or user2.getName. It looks like it's some sort of global function. Let's set a breakpoint on line number 6, and let's inspect the value of.
What's happening on line number 12?
Say it again?
Line number 12, what's going to happen when it gets set?
Line number 12, we are creating a reference to user1.getName. So we are creating a reference to a function, and we're saving that reference into a new variable called getName. But we don't have any dot notation here, right? So lexical this is not obvious what the value of lexical this is. However, look, I will hover. Actually, I don't even need to hover on the right-hand side. You see this window. What's that? What's that? Look. Oh. Many things here, right? So you've seen that when we declare a variable, generally speaking, we put let in front of it. That's a way to make sure the variable is only available within that particular scope or closure. However, on line number 10, 11, and 12, we didn't drop any let prefix. When we do that, JavaScript understands that these 3 lines will be global. Yeah? And when we talk about global, that implies that they will be assigned to the window object. So window object, which is as old as JavaScript is probably, is the global one. Yeah? Is available everywhere. In other words, what I've done so far is the same as typing window.firstName, window.lastName, window.getName, and like that. So window is a special object in JavaScript. If we do that, I think it's a bit easier to predict that the outcome will be Marie Curie, because we have an object, window.getName, all right? So it's the same as doing this.firstName, window.firstName, this.lastName is the same as window.lastName. But be careful, because window could be implicit. Now it's explicit, but if I remove it, it's the same. Does it make sense? What do you think about using the window object, about programming using the window object? Do you think it's a good practice? Do you think it's a bad practice, and why? Why is it bad practice? Correct. That's fantastic. It's polluting your global scope, and Ace is right. So don't do that. Even though you can say technically speaking it's possible, yeah? When you land on a project and you see the guys are dealing with window object, something smells. They have been unable to find a better way to communicate their components. However, I think it's also fair to say that we use the window object more often than we think. Let me show you an example. Do you remember, do you remember set timeout? Yeah? When we do set timeout, in reality, so sometimes we use it. It's not the end of the world, but generally speaking, we should be aware, and that's also a common job interview question, that we shouldn't rely on the window object at all. Yeah? I think it's also fair to say that window, do you know why it's called window and not Donald Trump? Because it runs on a window, right? In other words, window only applies on front-end JavaScript. In Node, we don't have window. Do you have anything equivalent in Node? If you've done some React expert training, you should know that. Because on React expert training, we mock the global object in the backend. What's the name of that object, Richard? It's called global. Yeah? So you can see something like that. Global.setTimeout. Yeah? But the pattern is the same. It's just an object, yeah, that is on top, is the root one. So if you don't use it, JavaScript, regardless whether it's front-end JavaScript or back-end JavaScript, will default it. All right, so that's the way this works. Is there any question? Say it again? Yeah? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Now let's make it everything even more complicated. So that rule has lasted for 20 years, still valid today, but that was the only valid criteria since 1995 until 2015. Why until 2015? Because in 2015, someone did that. Arrow functions. So far, we've assumed that a classic function and an arrow function were equivalent. Yeah, we can exchange, yeah? And that's true in the majority of the cases, except when we have to deal with lexical this. Remember, with classic functions, lexical this refers to the object that invoke the function. With an arrow function, it's different. It doesn't really care who invoked the function. It doesn't really care. It will simply use the parent, lexical this. Can anyone tell me what's the parent? Let me change that again. So let me simply do user1.getName. Can anyone tell me what will this snippet return? Say it again? Peter Williams. So Richard, say Peter Williams. We had Marie Curie before. So Vincent, Marie Curie. Who else? Nilofer. Anais, what do you say? So Richard and Anais, Peter Williams. Patrick, Iwon, Nilofer.
I want to say Vincent's right, but okay, I'll go with Vincent. So he's not alone, but yeah.
This is controversial, right? Because first of all, Vincent is suggesting that it will do Marie Curie, but that string is not even in my code. Right. However, Vincent is right. Vincent is right. Why Vincent is right? Look. Before, with a classic function, lexical this will clearly refer to user1, and that will clearly return Peter Williams. However, we've changed the classic function with an arrow function. That means it doesn't care if we run user1 or user2 or user3, it doesn't care. That has no effect at all. But then, what's the value if it's not the object that invokes the function? It's the parent context. When we talk about context, we may have nested context. I like to play an example if I got time today, otherwise on Friday. But if we don't have any parent context, JavaScript will take the global one. In other words, again, breakpoint on line number 6. And now, you see, the parent context is the window. But we've removed the Marie Curie thingy. Are these properties still hanging around? Yes. That's the problem dealing with window. Even if we remove the code, unless we kill the window, unless we close the tab, the window is still alive. Yeah, it's sort of cache, correct. That's why that returns Marie Curie, which is a bit mind-blowing, right? If someone is asking me, why it returns Marie Curie, and I have no context about what happened before, like, where is that coming from? It's not obvious. Yeah. So, lexical this, the value of lexical this will highly depend on whether we use a classic function or an arrow function. Let me change the example, the last one of the day. So we will have a classic function here, as we got before, and then here I like to create let actual or get actual username something like that. Please, let's spend 30 seconds trying to understand this algorithm. What will this return? Peter Williams. Why Peter Williams, Richard?
It's being called inside the object. So that's the parent context.
Correct. Because we have an arrow function here. That means that there is no new, so it doesn't really care who invoke get actual username. Because of that, it will go to the parent. So when we talk about context, generally speaking, we refer to functions. Okay? So in here, we have a parent function. So it will inherit the value of lexical this here. Yeah? And what's the value of lexical this on line number 6? The value of lexical this in line number 6 depends on who invoke getName, because that's a classic function. Because user1 invoke getName, that means that lexical this here equals user1. And because we use arrow functions, it will just inherit the same lexical this. That's why arrow functions are so convenient sometimes to inherit stuff. That's why that returns Peter Williams. And what happened, and this is the very last question of the day for me. If we get that. So Patrick said it will be undefined. Let's do something. Let's add a breakpoint on line number 8. This is not obvious. And I guess you can smell that if I keep making the example more complicated, at some point I wouldn't be able to give you the answer, right? So Line number 8. Oh. Why lexical this refers to window?
Because it's trying to calling it without saying who's calling it, so it just refers to the window.
That's correct. Look, line number 11. Get actual username. Who is invoking it? Do we have any object on the left hand side? No. We don't have a.getActualUsername, b.getActualUsername. So we are calling it globally somehow. That's why lexical this refers to the window object. And because we haven't refreshed the window, that means we still got, I believe, here you go, Marie Curie, still around. Here you go. Yeah? That's a classic job interview question as well. I'll tell you something, this is not obvious. But in here, we can spot not only whether you can give the right answer or not, but also how good you are breaking down problems. Yeah? I couldn't be able to give you the answer in 10 seconds. I may need 30 or 45 seconds. But I will break it down. So the way I will analyze that is, all right, so we call getName. Who is calling getName? User1. No problem at all. That means that here, the value of lexical this is user1. In other words, if on line number 6 I do this dot first name, it will return Peter. However, in reality, this function getName, yeah, is invoking another function using classic. Yeah, that new function is classic. So that means that the value of lexical this on line number 8 clearly depends on who is invoking getActualUsername. Let me try to do something even more complicated. Let user2 first name Donald, last name Trump. Let me put user2 before, and now let me do user2 dot getActualUsername equals getActualUsername, and then return user2 dot getActualUsername. I'll tell you something, I'm not even sure whether I understand that, right? But I like it. I like to do these exercises because it forces me to think a lot about whether I really master lexical this. So let's analyze that piece of weird code, right? So we do the same thing, right? User1 dot getName. And that means that in here, lexical this refers to user1. However, then we got here user2 dot getActualUsername, and that means that because getActual, oh sorry, that shouldn't be invoked, right? It's just a reference. Yeah. So that means that because getActualUsername is a classic function, if we invoke user2 dot getActualUsername, lexical this, in theory, refers to who? To what? User2, correct. I agree with Richard. And that means that in reality, that should return Donald Trump. Correct. But you see, it wasn't immediate to me. I had to think. And if I keep increasing the complexity, I keep sweating more and more, right? But I think that's a very healthy exercise because it really proves that even though that could be complicated, still logical. It's just a bunch of rules. Yeah? Is there any question?
And then what happens if we turn line 11 to an arrow function?
That's a good question. What happened now? What will it return? Peter Williams, I agree with Nilofer. Why? Because these two lines are bullshit at the moment. It doesn't matter because it's an arrow function. So it doesn't matter what we do with the binding. Yeah? In reality, thanks to the arrow function, it will inherit the parent. And what's the parent lexical this? Is user 1. And that means it should return Peter Williams. Here you go. Yeah? So today we've learned a couple of principles regarding lexical this. How does it work with classic functions and how does it work with arrow functions? However, once you manage to explain that successfully and to prove that your theory is correct, blah, 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 and you think you'll get the job, the interviewer still has a third question, which is, can I manually change the value of lexical this? And this is what Gray will explain this afternoon. Yeah? So on top of the classic and arrow function, we have a third factor, which is bind, call, and apply. But I will be on a separate session. That was it from my side. Thank you, guys.